Hello, my name is Carlos Predo Cruz, and this is the podcast 15 Minutes of Pharma. Welcome. My partner in this conversation is Manuel Fernandes. Manuel Fernandes is an API specialist, former industrial director, and consultant with decades of hands-on experience in pharmaceutical manufacturing. Manuel, in the last episode, we talked about anti-fragility and about risk at the system level. So today, you wanted to connect that idea to pricing power and to total cost of ownership. So let me start very simply. Why is that in the pharmaceutical industry, something that looks cheaper at the beginning can end up much more expensive at the end? Yeah.
Well, Carlos, I would say that it happens because in pharmaceutical manufacturing, and especially in APIs and CDMO settings, the initial price is usually just the visible part of the story and never the full cost. The invoice price is only the visible surface. Underneath that, you may have, development delays, failed engineering batches, quality inconsistencies, gaps in documentation, and maybe regulatory friction. And ultimately, and because of all the above, launch postponements and which conduct to lost revenue. Those hidden costs can easily dwarf the apparent savings. So my basic thesis is this: in pharma, the lowest price is often not the lowest cost.
Wow. Okay, so that's a strong distinction. So the lowest price is not the lowest cost. So when you talk about that, the hidden part of the cost, so what are the main things people tend to not see or tend to underestimate?
Yeah, Carlos. I would say that they tend to underestimate, the cost of instability. If the supplier is inconsistent, suddenly your team spends time firefighting. Technical people get pulled into rework. Regulatory people have to manage questions and amendments, and operations obviously lose rhythm, and as a consequence, timelines begin to slip. Uh, and if you are working on a product with meaningful commercial potential, every month of delay can become very expensive. So the hidden cost is not something abstract. It shows up in real labor, real disruption, and very often in lost revenue.
Okay, so this is where the idea of that total cost of ownership becomes much more relevant than the simple nominal price per kilo, let's say.
Absolutely right, Carlos. Total cost of ownership forces you to ask a better question. Not what is the supplier charging me, but rather what is this supplier likely to cost me once I consider the whole system. And that includes, reliability, responsiveness, technical support, regulatory readiness, and the ability to help the customer move forward without disruption. And once you frame it that way, some cheap options stop looking cheap very, very quickly.
Oh, okay. So let's try to make that more concrete. Do you have a real case where an apparently cheaper option turned out to be much more costly? So from your experience?
I do, Carlos. Let me give you a concrete example from my time at Cipan. Uh, we were approached at the time by Axcan, which later became Aptalis, for the supply of tetracycline hydrochloride to be used in the formulation of Pylera, which is a combination product for the treatment of Helicobacter pylori infections. And initially, the development had relied on a low-cost Chinese API supplier. Um, on paper, the economics looked attractive, but in practice, the project struggled.
Oh. struggled? What kind of problems were they seeing or feeling? I don't know.
You know, Carlos, interestingly, the challenges were not really about chemistry. They were more about execution and execution around chemistry. There were issues like inconsistent quality, you know, limited technical support from the supplier, weak CMC documentation, insufficient regulatory responsiveness, and I would say, and more generally, a supplier that was not robust enough for what the project required. So, you know, the real question was not simply, can they make the molecule? The real question was, can they support development and commercialization in a stable, credible, and well, regulatory safe way? And well, that is a very different question.
Yeah, so that's interesting. So, because what you're describing is not merely a product problem, so it's like an execution problem. So surrounding the product.
Yeah, absolutely right, Carlos. You know, in many industries, people talk as if product alone were the value. But in pharma, and well, especially in regulated markets, value comes from the whole delivery system around the product. You are not just buying material, you are buying consistency, you are buying technical support, documentation quality, responsiveness, and well, and the confidence that the supplier can help you move through development and approval without creating new problems. So yes, the chemistry matters, but you know, the operating system around the chemistry matters just as much.
Okay, so, and I assume so that becomes even more important for if the product is being developed for the US market, I believe.
Absolutely, Carlos.
Okay.
In this case, the product targeted the US market, and well, as you are very well saying, that raises the stakes significantly. You know, regulatory expectations are high, documentation matters enormously, and well, delays can be very costly because the commercial upside is very, very large. If the API supplier becomes a source of uncertainty, you know, that uncertainty can ripple across the entire program. And that is why switching suppliers is never a trivial decision. You know, every month of delay in launching a novel product in the US can represent tens of billions of dollars in lost revenue. So the ship API was no longer ship. It became a source of systemic risk.
Let's stay there for a moment. So, because I think many listeners outside pharma may miss this point. So, yeah. A lot of people hear supplier problems and think, fine, okay, just switch suppliers.
Yeah.
So, but in pharma, okay, changing this API supplier in the middle of development is not a routine purchasing move, is it?
Not at all, Carlos. Not at all. You know, changing an API supplier mid-development is not simply a procurement decision. It really can become a major technical and regulatory event. And you know, you may need new development work. You may need to perform new engineering batches. You may need to do additional analytical work to get new stability data, further process validation work, and obviously revised documentation. So in many cases, you also need, you know, regulatory amendments and new justification packages to fill with the FDA. So what looks like a simple sourcing adjustment can actually reset part of the project clock. And well, that's why the apparent savings from the shipper supplier can evaporate or even become irrelevant very, very quickly.
Okay, and once the project clock starts moving backward, so the economic consequences can be very big, so can be huge.
Yeah, exactly, Carlos. You know, if the product has really meaningful market potential, every lost month matters. So now the real comparison is no longer between supplier A and supplier B on price per kilo. I would say that the real comparison becomes something like who give me the best chance of reaching the market on time with fewer disruptions and lower execution risk. That is the point where the conversation shifts from nominal price to economic reality.
Mm. So this is the moment when a company like Cipan enters the picture. So, but under different terms. Huh?
Absolutely, Carlos. Absolutely, because then the conversation is no longer can you match the cheapest price. Rather, the conversation becomes something like around can you stabilize this project? Can you support development? Can you remove uncertainty from the project? Can you help us move, the project forward with confidence? So when we entered the project, we did not compete on price. We competed on execution. So, we adapted facilities, invested in dedicated infrastructure, produced engineering batches at the tens of kilogram scale, and supported the whole regulatory variation process, and and built a stable and reproducible manufacturing platform. And Carlos, I would say that if you can do that, you are no longer competing as a commodity supplier. You are competing as a risk reducing partner.
Yeah, okay. And that leads us directly into pricing power. So if I understand your argument correctly, Cipan did not win by being the lowest priced option, right?
Correct, absolutely correct. Cipan did not win by being cheaper in nominal terms. In fact, actually, the price was significantly higher. I can tell you that later we supplied more than 54 metric tons of tetracycline hydrochloride at a price roughly 8 times higher than the original Chinese reference. And the customer accepted that price, not because we negotiated aggressively, but because we removed uncertainty from the project. And I would say that is the essence of pricing power in this kind of environment. Pricing power exists when the customer understands that your higher price actually lowers their total economic risk.
Wow, that's a very important point. So lowers their total economic risk. So people often speak about pricing power as if we're something like salesmanship or about salesmanship or branding or negotiation strength. So, but your argument is that pricing power actually comes from something much deeper. Huh?
Yes, that's it, Carlos. In industrial and pharmaceutical settings, pricing power is very often the downstream result of operational substance. It comes from things like process control, technical competence, regulatory credibility, execution discipline, and the ability to perform under pressure. In other words, pricing power is not mostly something you say. It is something you earn by being genuinely more valuable in the customer's real operating context.
So what you're saying is that pricing power is not really a commercial trick. Okay, it's an operational outcome, an operational consequence.
Yeah, exactly, Carlos. If your systems are stronger, if your technical support is better, if your quality is more reliable, if your organization creates, fewer surprises for the customer, then your offer carries a completely different economic meaning. I would say that you earn pricing power when you reduce launch risk, when you can compress, regulatory timelines, when you are able to stabilize the quality of the product, and when you really support your customer system. And at that point, a premium price is not irrational. It is often completely justified. And I would say that is where total cost of ownership and pricing power meet.
Yeah, okay. So let me try to restate that in a sharper way. So the wrong question is, how much does the API cost per kilo? The better question is, how much does 1 month of delay cost me? So is that fair?
Absolutely, Carlos. Absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely right. Once the customer asks that question, I would say that the whole comparison changes. A higher API price may actually be the cheaper decision if it reduces the probability of disruption, delay, or regulatory trouble. That's why total cost of ownership sort of flips the equation, and the real question becomes how much does delay cost per month? And well, once you frame it that way, the eightfold price premium we have seen above becomes economically rational. The premium stops looking like extra cost and starts looking like insurance against much larger losses.
So, and I suppose this matters even more today than it did some years ago.
Yes, Carlos, I think it does. And this is why today we have more global competition, more complex supply chains, and, well, more regulatory scrutiny, and a much greater premium on speed. CDMOs compete globally. China competes aggressively on price. Uh, Regulatory complexity keeps increasing. And, well, as we have seen in other episodes, innovation cycles keep accelerating. And, well, in that environment, a low unit price without execution depth is not real competitiveness. Carlos, companies that focus only on nominal purchase price often underestimate the fragility they are importing into their own systems. And, well, in that sense, buying cheap can sometimes mean buying hidden exposure.
Okay, yeah, that connects nicely with the previous episode. So if a company wants to be less fragile and more resilient, so what capabilities does it actually need?
Yeah, that's a great question, Carlos. And I would say that it needs depth. Depth above all,
Mhm.
which means disciplined and control processes, a technical understanding, engineering capability. It has to be regulatory competence, and obviously reliable on manufacturing. And above all, it has to have the organizational maturity to support the customer when problems arise, because resilience is not only about surviving shocks, it's also about not creating avoidable shocks for your
Hmm.
customer. And, well, when a supplier can do that consistently, it moves out of the commodity space.
So the real competitive advantage is not being the cheapest, it's being the supplier that reduces uncertainty when the stakes are high.
Yes, Carlos, absolutely. And that is why this is not just a procurement issue, it's a strategic issue. A company that can reduce uncertainty for the customer can command better margins, build stronger relationships, and avoid the trap of pure price competition. And I would say that that is the real strategic implication.
So let me close with one final question. So if you had to condense the lesson of this case into one sentence that a COO or an industrial leader or a procurement executive should remember, would it be?
Yeah, Carlos, that's a great question, and I think I would say something along these lines. In complex regulated industries, customers are not really buying the cheapest input; they are buying the safest path to the outcome they need. I think this
Okay.
condenses very well all the issue that we have been discussing in this episode.
Okay. So And maybe that is the perfect closing line. Yeah. So in complex regulated systems, customers are not just buying the API, they are buying certainty. Is that so, Manuel?
Yes, that's correct. I think that is really the main takeaway of this episode.
Okay.
In development programs, where most of the times the stakes are so high, because as we have seen above, one month delay in the program can represent, tens of billions of dollars of lost revenue. Buying certainty is very important. It's very important that the sponsor can really can be reassured that its plans, its development and launch plans will not be compromised by deficiencies or lack of preparation of the CDMO counterpart. So I think that certainty is the key word here.
The key word. Okay. Now, Manuel, just one surprise before finishing. So, one surprise. So, I was reading, reading this book, okay, from Nassim Taleb because of anti-fragility from last episode, and it's in French. And I went to just before we started the call. I went to the last page, and there's something here that says. So I'm trying to translate it into English from the French. So in a strategy that can lead to ruin, the benefits never compensate the risks of the ruin. So, dans une stratégie qui entraîne la ruine, les bénéfices ne compensent jamais les risques de ruine. And I think that relates with what the cheapest,
Absolutely,
cheapest solution that after all becomes a terrible result.
Absolutely, right? I think you got the real juice from Nassim Taleb. A very important idea that Nassim Taleb tells us in that book, and that is precisely the message that we are trying to convey in this episode. So I think that's a very nice way to close the episode and to wrap up all the ideas and the discussion that we have been doing here around this theme.
Okay, so in the next episode, we will explore the forces shaping what we can call the new map of pharma manufacturing power. I hope you enjoy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Carlos.